Hello Stratters, I'm Nate. Today I'm doing a video about the 10-ticket modern format. This is the format for the league they're doing at magicgatheringstrat.com. It starts October 6th, so if you're watching this and you haven't joined the league, I'd recommend you give it a shot. It's free to join. I think the format is really fun. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So the idea is basically it's the modern format, but your whole deck can cost a maximum of 10 tickets on Magic Online. So just to say a little bit about what I like about this format, it really is a brewer's paradise. If you think about normally building a Magic deck, you have an idea for a deck, but maybe the cards are expensive, hard to get. It might take a while to acquire them. Maybe you never get to play the deck at all. But in this format, you can build a deck, buy the cards and be playing your deck within minutes, literally. So you can try out a lot of ideas. Really fun and easy to build new decks. So if you're a brewer, or maybe you don't do much deck building, this would be a great opportunity to kind of flex your creative muscles and give it a shot. The purpose of this video is just going to be to explore a few possible decks, a few directions the metagame might go. Obviously, it's not intended to be any sort of solution to the format or anything like that. Clearly, that would be impossible. Like with any Magic format, we should expect the metagame to be complex and dynamic. Who knows what sort of decks people will come up with. But this is just a few ideas to get the ball rolling on your own exploration. So let's jump into some decks. Today, this is going to be a three-part series. Today we're doing aggro, and subsequently we'll do combo and control, three major kinds of archetypes. So today's aggro, and we're going to kick it off with Burn. Very popular deck in Modern, sort of well known as a budget option as well. So the reason I'm starting with this is because I imagine a lot of people are going to have this idea. You might face this deck in the league, and if you're not prepared for it, it's very likely you'll lose to it because this deck is powerful and consistent. So I've got pulled up on MTG Goldfish here, which by the way is where you're going to be submitting your deck, a modern burn list. The game plan of this deck is quite simple. Just play a bunch of burn spells, point them at your opponent's face, and try to deal 20 damage. So we can see this deck costs 250 tickets. But obviously that's way outside of our budget for this league. But if we look at it, there's a lot of ways we can bring the cost down without giving up really much of the deck's power. First of all, this list is Naya. It's, in addition to red, it's splashing green and white. We can go back to a mono red deck without really giving up too much. So that's an easy first step. Just get rid of all these expensive dual lands, and we can just play a straight mountain mana base. And from there, it's pretty straightforward to build the deck. We just look for the most efficient burn spells. And if you do that, you will end up with something that looks like this. 18 mountains, a bunch of burn spells. All of our burn spells, for the most part, do at least 3 damage. That's kind of the magic number that you're looking for. And then we have Skullcrack and Flames of the Blood Hand in case anyone tries to do any life gain or damage prevention. That'll slow them down. Then we have 16 creatures as well, but really the creatures are mostly burn spells in disguise. For example, Spark Elemental just comes down, bashes them once, and dies. Basically just a 3 damage burn spell. And our only real creature is Monastery Swiftspear, which is the best option for a 1-drop. we don't get to play with Goblin Guide, so Monastery Swiftspear is the next best for this deck. And that's it really. Pretty straightforward deck, but you know, if you're not prepared for it, you could easily lose to it. It's very consistent. All its cards do basically the same thing, so it's just gonna perform its game plan regularly, and it'll burn you out on turn 4 or turn 5 for the most part. I'm not gonna do sideboards for these decks because the format is completely unknown, so you know, it'd just be total speculation. But just keep in mind to save some tickets for your sideboard. Right now we're coming in at about 8 tickets, so we'd have 2 for the sideboard. You know, the sideboarding is extremely important, but I'm not going to flesh out those sideboards in this video. Alright, let's move on to the next deck. Affinity. Another extremely powerful and popular modern option. So the game plan of Affinity is to flood the board with cheap artifacts, and you know, craft some extremely powerful attacks early in the game. So we've got these 0 and 1 cost artifacts like Memnite, Ornithopter, Signal Pest, that allow us to get a lot of the artifacts on the board very quickly, and then the payoff cards that convert that into huge damage, like Arcbound Ravager, Steel Overseer, Master of Ethereum. So looking at this deck, costs $350. Once again, the modern version way out of our price range, and this is going to be a little bit trickier to port over to 10 tickets than the burn deck was, because basically we can break down our deck into 2 types of cards. The first is the cheap enablers, the Memnites, the Ornithopters, etc. And we're good on those. They're all pretty cheap, just a few cents each, no problem there. But that's only half of our deck. The other half is the payoff cards. Ravagers, the Overseers, the Masters of Ethereum. And if you look at their price, those are a lot more expensive. Arcbound Ravager, we can't even afford one of those. Steel Overseer and Master of Ethereum, kind of moderately expensive, 2 to 3 tickets. Maybe we could afford a couple of those. Cranial Plating is great because it's another payoff card, and it's very effective and very cheap, so certainly we'll play 4 of those. That's a great option, but it's not enough. One of the masters of this deck, Frank Karsten, who's written a bunch of articles on it, he recommends playing at least 14 of these payoff cards to have the consistency you need to draw them, because if you don't draw one of these cards, your deck is totally pointless. You know, if you're just out there with Memnites and Ornithopters, that's not scaring anybody. You gotta have, you know, you gotta have these payoff cards. And so that's a big problem for us because, alright, we've got 4 Cranial Platings. Maybe we can play like 2 or 3 Etched Champions or Steel Overseers. That's only getting us to 6 or 7, and we're aiming for 14. So here's where this format gets interesting. We've got to dive into the modern card pool and see if there's some sort of replacement. Something that is going to take all our little artifact creatures and make them into a serious threat. So I'll put that idea on hold for just a moment. Take a look at the mana base. Again, too expensive for our purposes. The Ink Moth, Nexus, Glimmervoid, and Mox Opal, all very pricey cards. So we're going to keep the Darksteel Citadel because it's great to have any artifact we can play is great. But the rest of the mana base is going to have to change, and realistically, we're going to be playing a monocolor deck here. You know, with so many artifacts in the deck, we can cast at most 1 color of spells. So with that in mind, we need more payoff cards. And we're going to be monocolored. I'll show you the list I came up with. I decided white is the best color for one reason, really. This card, Tempered Steel. 2 white, 1 colorless enchantment. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. Huge payoff card, makes all of our little artifacts into huge threats. Really powerful card. In fact, you might even ask, why don't the normal modern versions of Affinity play this card? And the reason is the casting cost. This 2 white mana is very difficult for a normal Affinity deck to produce. So the normal versions don't play it. But it's actually a great card in terms of power level, right on par with something like Master of Ethereum, perhaps even better. And since we're playing monocolored anyway, we can just play a bunch of planes. And we're going to be able to cast Tempered Steel. So I've got that, and then I've got 2 Steel Overseers. So along with the Cranial Platings, that brings me to 10 payoff cards. I'm still looking for 4 more, and I went with 2 Chief of the Foundry, which is, well, okay, it's no Arcbound Ravager, but it's a pretty powerful card. Another Anthem for our artifacts, and 2 Ghostfire Blades. Another card that's easy to forget about. There's lots of hidden gems in the modern pool. Since most of our creatures are artifacts and therefore colorless, we can equip for 1 and pump up our creatures. Okay, that gets me to 14 pump effects. And the rest of the deck is mostly just cheap artifacts. Since we have a bunch of white sources, I played a few Court Homunculi, threw in some Frogmites, and just a couple interactive cards to dispatch. This is basically Swords to Plowshares in our deck. We don't have room for many cards like this. We need to keep our artifact count high, so all our cards function. But we can play a couple interactive cards for just a bit of flexibility. Okay, so that's my take on Affinity. It loses some from Modern, but still a very explosive and dangerous deck. I think this would also be a good choice. All right. So far, we've just been porting existing Modern decks, and you can do this with most of the aggro decks in Modern. 2 that come to mind are Infect and Elves. Quite possible to make 10-ticket versions of those decks that function quite well, keeping the core strategy intact. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'll leave that to you if you want to play those decks. So at this point, maybe you're sort of thinking, okay, this format just seems like watered-down versions of Modern decks, but I actually don't believe that's true. I think there's a lot of fresh ground to explore in this format. With the top decks getting taken down a notch, a few of the most powerful cards being ruled out, that opens up a lot of space for new strategies that have maybe not quite been there for fully powered Modern, but could make a splash in this format. So, for the third deck in this video, I'm just going to show you how I would go about creating a new deck for this format. So, I like to have 2 windows open. One, the MTG Goldfish. This is where I build my deck, and this is ultimately where you can submit your deck for the league. And the other one that I like to do is magiccards.info. So this is a site that allows you to search for cards with various filters. There's also gatherling.wizards.com, which basically does the same thing. I kind of like the interface on magiccards.info a little better, but they both work just fine. So okay, we've got our windows open. Now we would go to deck, submit a deck to create a new deck. And the deck I'm going to start today is Shamans. I played against someone who was playing a Shamans deck. It seemed pretty cool, so maybe I'll take a stab at making my own version. So Modern format. And then what I like to do is on magiccards.info, I'll go to advanced search. I'm going to select converted monocost and Modern format, obviously. Converted monocost just because that's the most helpful way to sort when we're deck building, since we want to be thinking about curve. And to start off with this deck, I would do type Shaman, And from what I've seen, the best ones are red and green. So I'll select red and green for colors. And we can go search. And here we go. So now what I'm going to do is look through the available options. And when I see a card that looks promising, I'll just write it in my deck list down here. Dragon Master Outcast is pretty cool. And there's a couple reasons for this. One is to maybe Essence Warden. One reason is to make a little note to myself that these are the cards I want to explore, and also this is going to allow me, once I update, to see how much these cards cost in tickets. Okay, Fire Drinker Satyr. Essence Warden and Fire Drinker probably don't go in the same deck. One is super aggro, one is, a life gain. But at this point we're just gathering ideas, so that's okay. Flamekin Harbinger. This card is sweet. It's like a 1 mana tutor that also puts a shaman in play, so probably going to play that guy. Martyr of Ashes, kind of a weird little wrath. Okay, so, and then if I was building the whole deck, I would continue on through all these with this process, but we'll just put it on hold there. I don't want to bore you guys, but what you can then do is click Update Preview down here, and it's going to show you how much these cards cost. So we can see so far, so good. They're all pretty cheap. And go from there. So, and then, I would build my deck, perhaps search for some other, I might do a Google search for modern shamans to see if anyone else had any ideas that I want to use. And then once you're done with that, you can actually just click right here, buy from Card Hoarder or buy from MTGO Traders, and actually just buy the deck. It'll load up all the cards, and you can have them delivered to you on Magic Online. So it's really fast and easy. All right, let me just show you one more filtering trick that's really useful. This is for when you're building your mana base. Often you're going to want to look for all the lands in a certain color combination. So you can select Modern, select Land, and then in Color Identity, Commander, select the colors you want and require multicolor. Selecting colors red and green wouldn't work because lands are all colorless. But the Commander Identity is going to include the lands that tap for those colors. So we can do search, and it's all the red-green lands in Modern. And I found it's actually quite unpredictable how much these will cost. It varies from color to color, but usually there's some good options that are pretty cheap. Okay, so that's all for today. So hopefully I've given you a few ideas for aggro decks, kind of demonstrated two processes for deck creation in this format. One is porting over an existing Modern deck, and the other is just brewing something up from scratch. The next video is going to be combo, and for me that's where this format really comes into its own, because this, there are so many crazy rares in Modern that maybe never quite made it in a constructed format, but actually have a ton of potential, and you can do some crazy stuff. So until then, happy brewing.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. You can find us on Twitter at MagicGathStrat, Facebook /MagicGatheringStrat, or on the web, magicgatheringstrat.com. There you can find articles and free prize-supported leagues. This is all brought to you by our Patreons and cardhoarder.com. If you enjoyed this content, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/magicgatheringstrat.